Hello, everybody. Welcome to Unit 8B. So Unit 8B is a big unit. It's really important. And the big idea of Unit 8B is that we are going to learn how to solve quadratic equations. So as a reminder, quadratic equations are equations that have the highest exponent of 2. And by the end of this unit, we're going to have 4 different methods that you can use, and then you'll be able to choose which method is most efficient. So this is similar to when we solve systems of equations, and we had 3 different methods, and by the end, you got to choose. So before we get into our first method, called factoring, which should sound familiar, I want you to do the first 3 problems at the top under warm-up. Okay, so on all 3 examples in the warm-up, we should be using inverse operations to isolate the variable. And then we get to the 4th problem, which is x squared plus 7x plus 10, and we don't know how to solve it because we can't use inverse operations. And so that's where factoring comes in. So our first method is going to be factoring, like I said, which sounds familiar. So what we're going to do is I'll walk you through the first problem in our graphic organizer. We'll only fill in method 1, and then we'll try some problems. So factoring, so let's go back to last unit or 2 units ago. So what I'm looking for are 2 numbers that multiply to 10 and add to 7. So at this point, hopefully you're like, oh, it should be 5 and 2, which I agree with. So we're going to break it up into our 2 binomials. So x plus 5 times x plus 2 equals 0. And the equals 0 part is the new piece, right? We now have an equation, right? I have an equal sign, and so I'm going to try to find my solution. So in order to solve a quadratic, we're going to use, to solve a quadratic by factoring, we're going to use what's called the zero product property. So what needs to happen is it's got to equal 0. And I have to have a product, which means multiplication, which is my 2 binomials. And then what I'm going to do is kind of fun. I'm going to take the first binomial, x plus 5 equals 0, and I'm going to use my inverse operations and get x equals negative 5. And I'm going to set my second binomial equal to 0 and solve it, subtract 2, and get x equals negative 2. And so those are my 2 solutions, x equals negative 5 and negative 2. Which is pretty cool. Now, I just want you to watch this next part. I'm just going to check because I want you to understand what this actually means to solve it. So to check, I'm going to plug in my first solution. I want to make sure it equals 0, right? So I have 25 minus 35 plus 10 equals 0, which worked. And then I'm also going to plug negative 2 into the function. So I get 4 minus 14 plus 10 equals 0, which also works. So you don't have to check it every time, but I just wanted you to see like what it actually means to be a solution, right? It means when I plug it in for a value, when I plug negative 5 and negative 2 in for a value of x, the left side equals the right side. So in the example above in the graphic organizer, I mentioned the zero product property. So I want to take a moment to officially explain what it means. So the zero product property, again, product means multiplication. Says let A and B be real numbers. If A times B equals 0, then we're allowed to say A equals 0 or B equals 0. So we're going to break them apart. And so it says this property can be used to solve any polynomial equation when one side of the equation equals 0 and the other side is a product of polynomial factors. So we have to have 2 conditions. Just trying to find a highlighter here. One side has to equal 0, and the other side we have to have a product, which again means multiplication. So to start off the first day of notes, these examples below, it says solve each factored polynomial equation. So let's go through our 2 conditions. First of all, do I have one side equal to 0? Oops, pen time. Yes. And is the other side a product of polynomial factors? Yeah, I have x and x minus 1 are being multiplied together, so I'm good to go. And so now to solve, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the first one equal to 0, so x equals 0. Oh, I don't have any other work to do. And then I'm going to set the second binomial, use inverse operation. Oops, not 10. And then I'm going to x equals 1. So my solution is x is going to equal 0 or 1. Notice I listed them with commas. You can list it that way. So the second one, notice it's already factored for us. Do I have one side equal to 0? Yes, good. Do I have a set of two products of factors? Yes. So I'm going to set the first one equal to 0, so 2x equals 0. Now to isolate x, I do have to use inverse operations. So I get x equals 0. Second one, I also need to use inverse operations. So notice I just skipped this step. I didn't show adding 5. You can do that if you need to. Don't hesitate. Show whatever work you need. We're going to divide by 6. Okay, so our solutions are 0 and 5, 6. So what I want you to do is pause the video and try C really quick. Okay, so for C, we should have gotten x equals 1 and 4/3. Now I do want to note, there is a GCF of -1 out front. If it's a GCF that's a number, so very important piece, if it's a number, we're going to ignore it. And here's why. If you look down here, I just copied the problem again, but I distributed that -1 into both terms down here. And notice when I use it, I set the binomial equal to 0. So instead of x minus 1, I have -x plus 1, which is the same thing, with the -1 out front distributed in, and I solve it. Notice I still get x equals 1. So again, when we have a GCF that is a number, we can ignore it because it's not going to affect our solution. So today on the back of day 1 notes is we're just going to continue practicing solving each polynomial equation by factoring. So this is going back and using all the same skills from Unit 7, except now we have one extra step of adding in the zero product property and getting our two solutions. So it's a quadratic, so we're going to have two solutions. When we do this, remember that each equation must be set equal to 0. Okay? And you're always looking for the GCF first, so just, make sure you look for GCF. Then we can check and try to use diamond math if A equals 1. Okay. And so I'll just do a quick refresher again. So maybe I had x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Oops, I first need to take this and factor it into my two binomials. So remember when I say diamond math, I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 6 and sum to 5. So in this case, it'd be a 2 and a 3. So we'd have x plus 2, x plus 3. Remember, the order of the binomials does not matter. And so this is where we would stop in Unit 7, but now we're going to go one step further and we're going to use it to solve our quadratic. So we'd have x plus 2 equals 0, x plus 3 equals 0, so x is going to equal -2, -3, and then I'm going to list both my answers together because I know that there's going to be two solutions. So I want you to try the remaining 6 problems. The video does have the solutions for you to check quickly, and there's detailed notes on Canvas. I first